What's good, y'all, and welcome back to another edition of Mr. Fitzgerald's biology class. Today we're really diving into our unit on energetics by looking at the two major components of this unit of photosynthesis and cell respiration. So get out your notebooks and let's dive in. So before we get fully into it, as we have in the past, we're going to kind of tie this into other stuff that we have learned. So when we've talked about organelles, we talked about the chloroplasts and the mitochondria. And hopefully you do remember that the chloroplast is an area where actually photosynthesis is done during within the plant cell. So this is where they absorb that sun's energy, they convert some materials into sugars, and those plants can then use those sugars for their own growth and nutrients as well. And also the mitochondria we did talk about as a site for energy. We often call it the powerhouse of the cell. So this is where cell respiration happens. So photosynthesis is going to be isolated to the chloroplast, specifically in plants, and then cell respiration is going to be conducted in the mitochondria of any cell that has a mitochondria as well. Notice how prokaryotes aren't involved in here, and we aren't going to talk about those single-celled organisms without a nucleus too frequently. We're going to keep these energetics things strictly more limited to the eukaryotic cells of plants and animals. All right, so photosynthesis, hopefully you kind of already know what this is, but if you don't, photo is a kind of Greek word that's referring to light. Okay, so when we're talking about photosynthesis, we're talking about light from either the sun or specific lamps within a room. Any light source actually does work for photosynthesis as long as it's emitting light. And then synthesis does mean to make or create. So putting these words together, we get photosynthesis, which means making something due to light. Okay, so we're going to take components and we're going to put those together by using the energy that we get from sunlight to kind of catalyze that reaction or push that reaction forward. Now, photosynthesis is something called an anabolic process. Okay, that's a big word that's basically referring to a process of building or making something, right? We already broke down the word photosynthesis as using light to create something or build something. So this is an anabolic process. And a lot of times I like to remember this as thinking of Anna as an engineer or a construction worker, and Anna likes to build. So Anna is my builder. And who does photosynthesis? It's really kind of basically plants. There's certain types of bacteria like cyanobacteria that do photosynthesis, as well as some types of protists. Paramecium can do it, and other types of protists as well. But the one that we most specifically focus on in this class often is plants, and then occasionally they'll throw in a question about bacteria as well, as something that is taking that energy from the sun and using that to create sugars in the process of photosynthesis. All right, so the equation for photosynthesis you do have to know. And unlike physical science, you don't have to balance this one. We're not going to focus on that, the balancing with coefficients and anything like that. We just need to see the reactants and the products. Remember, those on the left-hand side over there are the reactants, and those on the right-hand side are the products. So the equation for photosynthesis is we take carbon dioxide, CO2, and we add water to it in the presence of light. Now this will be done in the chloroplast, hence why that arrow is green there, kind of referencing that a little bit. And we produce glucose, or a specific type of sugar, okay, and oxygen as a byproduct. So technically oxygen in this process is actually a waste product that actually comes out. Even though that we need it to breathe, plants actually produce it a little bit as a waste in this reaction. Notice here too, just a little review of, you have a sugar molecule down here, and you should know that it's a sugar or a carbohydrate because it has a hexagon shape. So that should stick out in your brain as saying, ooh, that's a sugar. I know that because I see the hexagon, and we commonly call this one glucose. It's the most simple sugar that is in the cell. So kind of referring again to some different looks of the same process. So again, carbon dioxide will come in, water comes in through the roots, so carbon dioxide is brought in through the leaves. The water is soaked up through the roots and moved all the way up through capillary action to the leaves. And then those two materials are present within the leaf cells, specifically in their chloroplast, and then it's able to do the photosynthesis reaction using that sun's energy, and it's able to produce the sugars as a byproduct. And it's also able to produce oxygen as a byproduct as well. So this is a simplistic kind of elementary school look at this stuff. And we'll get a little bit more complex as we go as well. So it does get a little tougher than this for photosynthesis. Now, on the other hand, let's talk about cell respiration. So why do we need to eat? Hopefully you're kind of thinking of, well, we need to eat because we're hungry. We need to eat because maybe our blood sugar's low. We need to eat because we need energy. And all those things relate to the idea of cell respiration. We actually need to eat because we need to take in energy and break it down and reuse that energy within our body. So it's close to lunchtime, so I'm a little hungry myself. But we do take in sugars and we break those apart to release energy within cell respiration. So this process is the reason why you get so hungry and you desire to eat all the time. It is called a catabolic process because unlike an anabolic process, this process we're breaking something apart or destroying something or breaking it down. So I like to think and remember catabolic is easy because cats like to destroy things. If you have a cat at home, it probably likes to tear things apart or push things on the ground to try to break them. So cats are very destructive. So Anna likes to build, photosynthesis is building sugars, and cats like to destroy. Cell respiration is breaking those sugars down. And basically all kinds of organisms do this. We do it as humans or animals. Fungus does it as a fungal thing, as well as plants. Plants do need to break down sugars, otherwise how would they grow? If they're just making sugars, that takes energy, but they need to break those sugars back down to be able to grow and do their own cell processes. So all living organisms respire, regardless of what they are. Unlike what you've learned in elementary and middle school, where they only talk about plants with photosynthesis, plants do cell respiration as well. So please don't fall into that simple trap of thinking that it's only animals that respire. Now, when we talk about cell respiration, it is the opposite of photosynthesis. As you can see in this chart here, the plant's going to do photosynthesis. It's going to take in carbon dioxide and water. It's going to use the sun's energy to produce oxygen and glucose, which is usually brought in by some sort of animal, either by eating that plant or eating something that ate that plant to get those sugars and also the oxygens in the atmosphere, so we inhale that. They do cell respiration to produce carbon dioxide and water. Actually, when you breathe out, you actually do breathe out water as well. If you've ever held a piece of glass or something towards your mouth, you actually do get some of that condensation as some waste byproduct that's stuck in your lungs that kind of moves out as well. So you do produce water actually when you break down sugar. So thinking about if it's the opposite of photosynthesis, what might the equation for cell respiration look like? Well, if you look at this cycle, right, the photosynthesis feeds into cell respiration and it goes back. So hopefully you're tying the idea together that basically the equation is just the opposite of photosynthesis. Instead of ending with glucose and oxygen, those are our reactants in this one. And our products, what's produced here, is going to be carbon dioxide and water. Also note that light is not present in this one. You can breathe in the dark, right? You breathe in the dark, you break down sugars in the dark. Actually, that's when plants grow. It's usually at nighttime when they're not doing photosynthesis during the day, so they do cell respiration typically at night. So this equation works whether it's light or dark outside. So another cool thing about this reaction is basically a chemistry kind of tie-in. Whenever you have something like glucose or oil or anything that's being mixed with oxygen and it produces carbon dioxide and water, that's called a combustion reaction. So basically the same process of wood burning is kind of the same process of what's going on in your cells. We're taking glucose and we're breaking it down in the presence of oxygen and producing carbon dioxide and water. So you're kind of like having little tiny fires inside of you in a way. It's not actually flammable, but it's kind of the same process. So every one of you is lit, and remember that. All right, so another kind of diagrams to look at these things and see how they're interrelated, right? Photosynthesis is a process where we produce sugar as well as oxygen that feeds into cell respiration, and then carbon dioxide and water are the byproduct that feed back into photosynthesis. Again, looking at it over here, we've got carbon dioxide and water feeding into photosynthesis with light energy to produce our sugar, nice glucose hexagon molecule there, as well as our oxygen, which then goes into cell respiration, produces something called ATP that we've referenced before, but we'll talk a lot more about in the future as well. And then the process continues to repeat. So energy comes in through photosynthesis and actually leaves through cell respiration in this process. Another cool look at it, again, tying into the organelles, right? So over here we have photosynthesis being done at the chloroplast. I have carbon dioxide and water coming in. So this one's just counterclockwise to show you a different look. Carbon dioxide and water coming into the chloroplast, glucose, C6H12O6 coming out, as well as O2 coming out to the mitochondria, where we break down that sugar in that presence of oxygen and we produce energy as well as some heat as a byproduct. So if you've ever noticed you feel hot after working out or doing anything, that's because you're producing heat in this process because it's not perfectly efficient. All right? So watch out for the common mistake that I actually did bring up before that. All living things need to break down sugar to live. That means every little thing needs to respire Doesn't matter if it's a plant, an animal, a fungus. If it's alive, it has to do cell respiration. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that plants only do photosynthesis. They're the only ones that can with some bacteria. However, they do cell respiration just like animals, otherwise they can't grow, they can't live, okay? So, trick question might look like this. Which of the following respire? A dog, a human, a mushroom, and a tree. And a lot of students will pick the tree or the mushroom because they're thinking plant style and they're thinking of photosynthesis. Well, mushrooms actually don't do photosynthesis at all. They are just a kind of similar to an animal cell with it being a fungus. And trees do photosynthesis, but they have to break those sugars back down. So that makes them do cell respiration. So all living things do cell respiration. Doesn't matter what it is, they have to do cell respiration. Now, an interesting thing that can come from all these relationships between photosynthesis and cell respiration is I can take 2 jars and I can seal them off like this. And I can put some goldfish in here or some betta fish or something. And I can put some plants in there and have the water balanced to its pH and everything. And those goldfish will actually survive fairly well if I feed them because they don't really eat the plants. But if I feed them and provide them nutrients through food, those 2 can survive without any mixing of the atmosphere in here. And that's because the plants will actually take the carbon dioxide that's produced by the fish and actually use that to not only do their photosynthesis, but also produce oxygen for not only the fish, but themselves. They do need the oxygen that's in there as well for them to grow. So plants are kind of unique. We can put plants inside of sealed jars as long as they have water and sunlight. They'll basically take care of themselves. They won't be able to grow unless they have another organism in there with them. So in this case, the fish will actually provide an additional amount of carbon dioxide that it can convert to sugar to allow the plant to grow. But I can actually seal off things in what are called terrariums and allow these plants to just grow in sealed jars. So photosynthesis and cell respiration are working in tandem here. As CO2 is produced, the plant takes it in, makes its sugars, and as a byproduct produces oxygen that the fish can then absorb again and then use that to break down the sugars that it's getting as well. So these 2 things can work together. Hopefully that gives you a good introduction to cell energetics, and we'll explore more of these topics in the future. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via campus, and hope you have a great day.